Staccato HD has been out for a while now, and with the new 3.6 being released, figured now is the time to stop dragging our heels and share our thoughts on HD P4. First off, we'll talk about some of the unique features and advantages of this design. Then we'll go over how it shoots. Then we'll talk about some of the possible disadvantages and our final thoughts to hopefully help you decide if the HD series is right for you. As always, there will be chapters below to help you navigate the video in case I start rambling a bit too much. I'm Brent with Hammer Armament. Let's get into it. Let's start off with some of the new features that make this gun different from traditional 2011s. Now, the biggest design change that I'd say is that it takes Glock mags. Wow, Glock mags. The 2011 mags have a bit of a reputation of being somewhat temperamental, but Glock mags have been pretty well known for a long time as being the most reliable pistol magazine. For lots of gun guys and police departments looking to make the switch, this is obviously a good thing. Now, Stacato uses its own version rather than the actual Glock brand mags, but actual Glock mags do work just fine. This does change the grip angle just slightly, but in my opinion, it kind of isn't really noticeable after about the first 5 minutes of handling it. With the change in mags and grip angle, the grip size and shape has also changed, being much slimmer than normal Staccatos. The next big change is that the HD is now drop safe with its modified Series 80 trigger, which adds a firing pin safety. Normal 2011s and 1911s are not considered drop safe because there's nothing stopping the firing pin from slamming forward if dropped. More on that later. This trigger breaks reliably right at 4 pounds, and to my surprise, it doesn't really feel mushy at all, kind of like you would expect with a Series 80 trigger. The HD also does not have a grip safety, which some guys will love. Many people, particularly Glock shooters, often had issues with the grip safety not being disengaged due to how high their grip is. So many guys either had the safeties pinned or used like a Ranger band or something like that to kind of keep it deactivated. The HD does still have the usual ambi safety as well as the firing pin safety. So in theory, this gun should be more safe than typical 2011s. On the point of ambi safeties, this gun is more left-hand friendly than other 2011s. Not only do they have the typical ambi safety, but also the slide stop, slide release is now also fully ambidextrous. Left-handed mag releases are also available for our wrong-handed friends as well. The mag release is also a bit of a change from tradition, being a different size and shape than usual. I actually really like this. They managed to make the mag release both lower profile, but also easier to reach. On most 2011s, if you want an extended mag release, they either just make them taller or add like a paddle to it, but that also makes them easier to accidentally drop the mag. This mag release is pretty well protected by its location, but still easy to activate without having to change your grip too much, at least with my big mitts. The slide and frame are a different shape and size as well, as is the trigger guard. Now, the trigger guard obviously shares some similarities with Glock trigger guards, which gives you a bit more room, I guess, and it's nice when you're wearing gloves. It's just a little bit easier to get your finger in there. The optic mount is a bit different on these as well, with the fixed iron sights that are separate from the mounting plate. On other Staccatos and most guns, the rear sight is part of the mounting plate. An obvious problem with the old way of doing that is that if your optic plate gets loose, both your optic and your iron sights can both be a little bit off if that's loose. This way, even if your optic was completely sheared off, the irons will still be on the gun and usable, at least in theory. For anyone running an SRO, it places the optic further back so that the overhang of the SRO doesn't cover up the ejection port, and it also doesn't interfere with the rear sight. Though the Vortex Defender XL does conflict with the rear sight with the Delta Point Pro plate. So you either will have to drift this sucker out of there or maybe find a different plate for that. Internally, the HD also uses a different guide rod and recoil spring system, and also features an external extractor. So, how does it shoot? Okay, first let's talk about the trigger. Honestly, it's better than I expected it would be. It doesn't feel that much different than a typical 2011 trigger. On other 2011 triggers, you have that little bit of take up, and the wall, that crisp break, short over travel, and a short reset. With the HD, there's that little bit of take up before the wall, then it almost feels like it bends before it breaks, and the same over travel and reset. But you gotta be going at like a turtle's pace and really focus on it to notice it. I've been shooting my Atlas Athena a ton this year, so the heavier trigger on this took some getting used to. But aside from the 4-pound trigger weight, which isn't bad by any means, it's just not what I'm used to right now, it's a pretty good trigger. It doesn't really feel that much different than my Staccato P's trigger, which is about the same weight. And it feels better than the trigger on my Staccato C. The controls are all easy to access, so mag changes were fine, though the different grip angle and mag shape took a little bit of getting used to for reloads, but that's easily ironed out with enough dry fire practice. Like I said, I like the mag release, it's a good shape and position. The ambi slide release doesn't really benefit me, but it's also not in the way at all. Recoil felt pretty similar to the Staccato C, though maybe a bit smoother. It's snappy, but also returned pretty well with the 124 grain ammo from Super Val that I was using. I didn't really test out other ammo types other than a mag full of kind of assorted plus P defensive ammo, which all shot fine. The grip was my biggest issue, keyword being my. There's nothing really wrong with it, and the texture is pretty good. It's a good mixture of like sticky but not too abrasive for carry, and I didn't notice any hot spots like some of the guys did on the initial versions. But it was a bit tricky for me to make it work with my big hands. It took some effort and adjustment to make sure that my support hand was gripping the gun and not just my other hand, which this is a common issue for me in most guns. Once I wrapped my brain around how to wrap my hands around it and make that good connection to the gun, it felt like things started to fall into place. It was actually a pretty fun gun to shoot. It's pretty fast and accurate. It's a bit heavier than the Staccato C, but that's not actually noticeable while shooting or carrying. I still need to get used to the trigger that's almost 3 times heavier than the Atlas I've been shooting, but that's my problem, not the gun's problem. To be honest, I wasn't particularly excited about this gun initially, for reasons we'll get into in a minute. Hence why I dragged my feet on reviewing it. The trigger, while good, is heavier than what I'm used to, and the grip, while great for concealed carry, is smaller than what I would prefer for my fat hands. For these 2 reasons, it didn't really blow my hair back when I first tried it out. It felt like another version of the Staccato C. However, after forcing myself to put down my Athena and spend some more time with the HD and getting used to the grip and the trigger some more, I actually started to like this a lot. Everything seemed to kind of smooth out and it was a lot more enjoyable to shoot. There weren't any real issues with reliability either. It had a couple of hiccups in the first 500 rounds with failure to go into battery, and one of the mags was a little bit sticky and didn't like to drop free every time, like Glock mags tend to do. These things don't worry me so much in the first 500 rounds or so. The gun was cleaned and oiled before shooting, but the first few hundred rounds are well within what I would consider the break-in period. Failure to extract, failure to feed, or stovepipes, those would be more concerning to me, but they didn't happen. So the last 1,500 or so rounds has been mostly trouble-free except for one instance. I tested this gun with the mags that came with it, and a random assortment of other Glock pattern mags. All of them, from actual Glock mags to Magpul Glock mags to these big sticks, worked fine. Except I did have another failure to go into battery with this big stick, but this was at the end of a range day with approximately 600 rounds through it. So I added some oil to the gun and the issue went away. This is pretty much when I would expect to have a malfunction in my experience. I find that 2011's like a little drinky pool of oil every 500 rounds or so, or they get sluggish and start to have issues. So I don't think it was the mag's fault here, it ran fine after. Some guys seem to think that a gun needs to be able to run like indefinitely without adding oil for it to be suitable for duty or concealed carry, as if they expect to get in a gunfight that lasts over 500 rounds, which is like 28 mags worth of ammo with these standard capacity mags. I just keep a little bottle of oil in my range bag and give her a little squirt at all the right spots and get back to shooting. I really enjoyed how well the HD P4 works for carry. With a good holster, it's easy to conceal and it's very comfortable. I prefer appendix carry most of the time, and even with my ever-growing midsection, it was good. It was comfortable, fine, easy to access. I prefer this to the Staccato C or even the CS, unless I really need something small, then I use the CS. To recap, the advantages of the HD series over traditional 2011s are that it takes Glock mags, it's got that Series 80 trigger that makes it drop safe, it has a slimmer grip, fixed backup irons with the new optic mount, and a larger trigger guard. So let's talk about potential disadvantages. Well, it takes Glock mags, it has a Series 80 trigger, a slimmer grip, different optic plates, and a larger trigger guard. So what the fuck? How can these things both be a pro and a con? Well, whether any of these things are an advantage or disadvantage is going to depend on what you're used to and what you want out of it. Personally, I've never been a big Glock guy, so I don't have a ton of extra Glock mags sitting around. I really like 2011, so I have a whole bunch of 2011 mags sitting around. Sure, Glock mags are cheaper to replace or to get more of them, but it's still a cost that I would have to put into this thing. It's nice that more mags are readily available, even if they aren't Staccato brand. One of the issues with the C and the CS is that you don't have a whole lot of availability of them. If you don't have a ton of Glock mags or Staccato mags laying around, then this is kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. It's the same as any other new gun. The Series 80 trigger was done very well, but I also personally didn't care a whole lot about the whole drop safe thing. Because calling 1911s or 2011s not drop safe doesn't tell the whole story. Because there isn't a firing pin block on the regular 2011s, if dropped in just the right way, the inertia from the firing pin could cause it to slide forward and ignite the primer. However, it pretty much has to be dropped muzzle down on a hard surface for this to happen. So it's a very specific way that it is not drop safe, and the reality is that 1911s have pretty much always been this way, like without any issue. It's mostly police departments or military that care about this. I can't actually find any cases of this being tied to any injuries. But then again, they did a good job with it, so it's kind of not a big problem one way or the other. It's just not a selling point for me personally. A slimmer grip does make it easier to conceal. Just that little bit extra of a slimmer grip helps to reduce printing. However, I have larger than normal hands. Not like freaky Tony Robinson banana fingers, but like sausage-like enough that I prefer the larger grip of normal 2011s. I don't like the grip profile of this as much, with it being slimmer at the bottom. I feel like I had to somewhat be conscious of keeping my hands kind of pushed inward to maintain that contact with the grip of the gun. The fixed irons are cool, and that's a smart idea, but it does require new plates that are different than the rest of the Staccato lineup. Again, this is a personal thing and probably doesn't matter to anyone that doesn't have a bunch of Staccatos that they're always swapping optics around on. This is a bit nitpicky, and it's personally just about me being cheap. Because it uses a Glock style trigger guard, this does push any light further away from the grip. So it can make activating switches just a little bit trickier. For concealed carry with the light, this also means that the grip is going to sit higher above your waistline, or the light sits deeper in your pants, kind of depending on how you have your holster mount set up. For example, if you run the HD P4 or 4.5 with a Surefire X300, the distance between the grip and the end of the light, like the light bezel, is actually going to be longer than on a Staccato XC with an X300. If you're used to Glocks, you might not perceive any difference at all in this, because it's going to be about the same. But having carried an XC with an X300 for a long time, I did notice it. Not a deal breaker by any means, just something to consider. One other thing to be aware of, because I've seen this question pop up all over the place, is that because this gun strays from normal 2011 dimensions, it does require specific holsters. It will not properly fit into other Staccato holsters, or even Glock holsters for that matter, even if you have a light. Most light-bearing holsters are based on the light for retention, but that doesn't mean that the slide profile, slide height, slide width doesn't matter. So this, with its wider frame, especially this part here, and its change in height here, it does make a difference. But we do have Staccato HD P4 and 4.5 versions in all of our different holster models. From our Loki IWB to Balder and Thunder OWB concealment, our Lightning, which is our light-bearing outside the waistband holsters, and our Thunder HD, which is more of a duty style holster. And one last thing is disassembly. Disassembly on these things is a little bit different as well, and frankly, it's a bit of a pain in the ass. So all things considered, would I recommend this? I would, as long as it checks the right boxes for you. Overall, I think this is a well-done pistol, and I think it has some very intelligent improvements over the traditional 2011 design. If you were a Glock guy before, and you want to dip your toes in the 2011 waters, I think this is a good way to do it, because there's going to be just enough differences and just enough similarities that you'll probably like it. If you like 2011s, but just want something a little bit smaller, maybe a little bit more purpose-built for concealed carry, and don't have giant banana hands, then I think this is, again, well worth considering. To me, it seems like the target market for this is obviously police departments or concealed carriers. not so much competition guys. So if you're a 2011 purist who just wants another 2011 because it's the hot new thing, you might not like it as much. I think I much prefer this over the Staccato C. Maybe not so much over the C2, just due to the grip size, parts commonality with my other Staccatos, and how many mags I already have for those. I actually kind of wonder how long the C and CS lineup will continue now that the 3.6 version of these is out. I think the 4-inch guns are kind of a sweet spot, at least for me, for being the right size to carry, but also not being too small to train or even compete with. An HD P4 sits kind of right in that sweet spot. I've been carrying this for a couple months and it's been very comfortable to carry and pretty good to shoot. Anyways, feel free to drop a comment below and tell me if you think I'm bang on with this or if I'm full of shit. Hopefully you found this informative. If you made it this far into the video, I'd like to thank you for spending your time with us. If you liked it, please drop a like and consider subscribing to our channel. And if you're in the market for a holster for this or many other fine firearms, check us out at hammerarmament.com. Thanks for watching, folks. See you later.